Hello YouTube, I'm back with the next Yu-Gi-Oh! Review, and today I'm reviewing the Starter Deck 2006, which is pretty much like the first Yu-Gi-Oh! GX era starter deck. Includes some rather nifty reprints. Some of the cards unfortunately are banned, like Heavy Storm, which is also included in this. This is a reprint of Blade Edge as well, which is actually an ultra rare card. This is no trickery of the light or anything like that. It's definitely ultra rare. Which is probably good, because I think the last print of this card was back in Elemental Energy, where it was, oddly enough, it was a super. Although this Ultra is like a free Ultra, you get it for just buying the deck, so that's pretty cool. This also includes like reprints of cards that really hadn't seen a print in a long time, like Red Medicine. Although the card sucks, it was at this point in dire need of a reprint because it was last printed back in Legend of the Blue Eyes, all the way back in the first set for the Yu-Gi-Oh! Trading Card game back in 2002. So, granted, although it didn't get much of it, didn't really get a whole lot of a change in its error to its text, it was still worthwhile to print, and this was also the second official reprint of Luster Dragon #2, which back in Legacy of Darkness was just Luster Dragon, but now that we actually had gotten another monster named Luster Dragon, they changed it to Luster Dragon #2 for this card. So I think a lot of these cards are actually either, yeah, because some of these were about a year old, I think, when they were last reprinted at the time. So, yeah, unfortunately, this is also somewhat, maybe loosely based on Jaden's deck from the TV series. His Elemental Heroes are here. There's a Sparkman and Wild and Bersertrix. But there's also some pretty decent cards in here, too. You got Princess Tsurugi. Deals 500 damage once it's flipped face up for every spell or trap card your opponent controls, so that's pretty cool. I mean, you got probably, I think, the strongest monster to inflict piercing damage that is level 4 or lower, though it does have a side effect. It's not as bad as, like, Goblin Attack Force, which can't change its battle position at the end of your next turn, leaving it really vulnerable. I think, yeah, even cards like Monster Reincarnation, I think this was actually one of the first prints of this card, too, since its print in Rise of Destiny, I think it was, where it was a super rare. It's just too bad, because this deck would otherwise probably be at least somewhat competitive. I mean, it's got brain control. Can't use that now for obvious reasons. It's just too overpowered. Even the 800 life point cost is just too little. And incidentally, remember I was talking about Luster Dragon, the first one, when I was using Magician's Force? It's in here too. So, although, of course, like any starter deck, contains junk cards that you ordinarily are not going to see in tournaments like Warrior of Zera, which is only really usable with Archlord Zerato, which is really not that good of a card anyway. I mean, there are definitely better cards than that in here. You got good classics in here. This is also the first English print of Skalingel, which was never printed in English until this moment. I kind of forgot to mention that. Let's see if there's anything else in here. I mean, you got good cards like Magic Cylinder, which I think still would be competitive even today. So, it's good to have that, I would say. It's not a bad starter deck for sure, because, I mean, a good deal of Earth monsters, and I think that's what they were trying to go for. Because, I mean, you got Gaia Power, which will power up all the monsters by 500 attack and drain their defense by 400. Also, the only print of Cemetery Bomb, actually, since that was also Rise of Destiny. And what makes it especially noteworthy, it's the only card with the word bomb in English. It's never, ever. You'll notice, no card to date beyond this card has the word bomb in it. Ever. Unless you're in Japanese, but then that's like only from translation, not from actual printing in English. And I'm sure if this card were to get a print now, it would be changed to probably Cemetery Explosion or something of that nature. Even though bomb isn't the worst name they've used, worst word they've used in, they could use in that, but we have to remember this is basically aimed at kids for the most part, so. Which, of course, yes, I know that's subject to debate, because, I mean, there are certain cards you'd probably figure kids would be afraid of, so. But I'd say this is definitely, if you can't get the earlier starter decks, which is probably certainly possible, considering the fact that they're out of print, this one may be another good candidate. There's some strong level 4 monsters, Dark Blades in here as well. So. Well, unfortunately, not all of them are Earth. So Gaia Power is not always going to help you, but in case it doesn't, you got Black Pendant, which I think was also It was reprinted in Dark Beginning, but that was, again, about a year ago. I'm glad a lot of these cards did have reprints in the more recent reprint sets, Dark Beginning and Dark Beginning 2, Volume 2. Volumes 1 and 2. So this is Spear Dragon, which was a super rare in that Dark Beginning Volume 2 at the time. So, and Brain Control, I think, was also back in the Lost Millennium, which was also, yeah, this isn't entirely a year old, but it's pretty close. I'm gonna basically say it's about a year old. Unfortunately, they include monsters like the Trojan Horse, which is really not going to help you in this deck all that much, because the only monster you can actually use it with is Blade Edge. I would have thought if you're going to include this card, I would include more than one high-level monster to tribute someone with this. Heck, throw in Gear Golem. I mean, how nice would that have been? That would have been a much better monster than Blade Edge, because although Blade Edge can be special summoned, Gear Golem gets basically... You don't have to worry about anything when you attack with it. You pretty much just... And inflicts piercing damage as well. It's got higher attack. It's a little more worthwhile than... And it's a machine, so you got, you can go, okay, attack, limb removal, 6,000. That can be devastating to your opponent. And they can't use anything against it, really. Except, the only way they can really get around that is with things like Effect Veiler, but that didn't exist at the time this was printed. That wasn't out until Duelist Revolution. And even then, you're really getting you're really gonna have to work to get that card. It was an ultra rare and ultimate rare, I believe, when it first came out. And then later, even after it got reprinted in Duelist Pack Yusei, which I think it was a rare, but it was a harder to get rare, you were still going to have a hard time. It was probably, you could probably compare it to the ultra rare in terms of how hard it was to get. But yeah, I would say this is definitely a little more recent. You might have better luck getting this one. I mean, especially if you're a fan of the TV show, and Kuribo's in here too, which incidentally, Jaden did see Yugi, so this is sort of like a homage to both Yugi and Jaden in some sense. And a little bit of Kaibai. But only because of certain cards. Or appearance. That would appear. I think yeah, a lot of these cards were only printed in way back when. I think Spirit Caller, which is pretty well useless in this deck, was last printed in Ancient Sanctuary. Although it wasn't that hard to get back then. It did need I think it probably needed another reprint, which is what they did here. Jar of Greed, I think, was also printed in Dark Beginning Volume 1, although it was originally a super in Labyrinth of Nightmare, I think. Or of some sort, but, I mean, it's a good draw card. It's like, it won't cost you your draw phases like Reckless Greed, although it only lets you draw half the cards. But yeah, don't, if you end up buying this deck, don't take it to a tournament, at least as is. I would take out cards, especially the ones that are banned. Although if you're a new player, you may get, you know, some leeway. They'll point out, hey, that card is not banned. I'll let you take it back, put it aside somewhere. If you have a deck box, put it in there, and just like, you know, for future reference, keep it out of your deck. But also make sure you still have 40 cards beyond that. And there's, let's see, I think there's 2 cards in here that are banned. Yeah. Brain Control and Heavy Storm. Heavy Storm pretty much, for most people, would be the dark hole for spell and trap cards. Just use it on your opponent's side of the field when you have nothing out, and then set your field. Much like Harpy's Feather Duster, really, which is also banned, and not included in this deck. But I mean, you got some, at least some. It's not too bad, 'cause, I mean, I think Ready for Intercepting is another card included. I'm not sure if this card saw a whole lot of. I don't think it's been reprinted all that much. I mean, probably had some since this was printed, but I mean, it's not a terrible card. It's a little more. It's a little situational because I mean, it applies to specific monsters. Yeah, it's pretty much a Book of Moon for warriors and spellcasters. So it's not as good. It'd be nice if that were a Book of Moon, which does the exact same thing. Only it applies to any monster you want, really. Obviously, except ones that are unaffected by spell cards or other effects. I think Magician of Faith was banned for a time. It's included in here as well. It's not a bad card to include in here. especially since it's got a Heavy Storm. So, I mean, it's okay for a deck that you're just starting out. You get to see some powerful cards that you're never going to be able to use in tournaments. And it's not the worst deck. I'd say it's a definite improvement from the first 2 starter decks, and even to some extent the evolution decks. But still, don't count on winning it, even if you do take with the tournament. I would not expect you to win with this. Although, actually, oddly enough, I think, I don't know, was it this deck? I think it might have, I don't know, it was late, I feel like maybe there was one time I used this in a tournament, back when the cards were still legal, and I actually did relatively well with it. I didn't win, but I mean, I also be thinking of using like one of the Jaden Yuki or Cyrus Truesdale starter decks, which I think I'm rating next in the list. But yeah, definitely, if you can't get your hands on the first 2 starter decks, Yugi and Kaiba, I would probably get this one. It's the next best one out of the list. Doesn't include any Infusion, Synchro, or Xyz. And obviously, since the latter of those 2 didn't even exist, and were not even, no one would have expected those to get released. So, yeah. That's my review on Starter Deck 2006. Thanks for watching.